Seraphina is a noble knight who, after losing in battle, is taken as a prize by the most powerful barbarian warrior and forced to marry him. But she ends up discovering that life among the barbarians is way better than she ever imagined. Seraphina wakes up in a freezing cold cell, barely lit by a thin strip of light sneaking in through a tiny window. She looks around trying to figure out where she is, and realizes she's chained up. Then the memories start flooding back, piece by piece, and it hits her. She became a war prize. Let's rewind a little. Seraphina was leading the expeditionary forces of the Kingdom of Ildren with orders to pacify the Eastern Territory, which is basically a fancy way of saying, go deal with the barbarians. Even with top-tier weapons and a massive army, the barbarians turned out to be insanely more powerful than anyone expected. Seraphina shouts at her men to fall back. But then, out of nowhere, 4 barbarian warriors charge straight at her, and she shows them. No hesitation, zero mercy. Exactly why she's the only female commander out there, taking all 4 of them down with a single strike. Even so, the situation was bad. Really bad. The casualties were piling up way too fast, and Seraphina knew that if they lost any more troops, there was no way they'd make it back to the kingdom alive. 7 years on campaign, and the 17th Eastern mission was ending like this, and that's exactly when he showed up. The barbarian leader tore through the battlefield, cutting down anyone who dared to get in his way. When his eyes locked onto Seraphina's, he said, cool and calm, that he was done wasting his time killing random people, and challenged her to a duel. Seraphina knew she couldn't beat this guy. She knew. But she also knew that ignoring a warrior capable of shredding full armor like it was tissue paper meant certain death for her men. So, with no real choice, she stepped up. The fight was absolutely insane. Swords clashing, every blow heavier than the last. The barbarian was getting fired up. Very few people had ever gone toe-to-toe with him and held their ground, and when he realized his opponent was a woman, he got even more pumped and started unleashing a full-on combo assault. Seraphina decided to go all in and launched her most powerful attack. The blades collided with a force that shook the air, and then the unthinkable happened. Seraphina's sword was sliced clean in half. The barbarian congratulated her for lasting through a duel against him. Seraphina thought about ending it right there on the spot, but he firmly refused to let that happen. He said that now she was his prize. He also said he had a great idea, and that Seraphina's body would come in very handy. Seraphina's blood ran cold, her mind immediately jumping to the worst possible scenario. And that's how she ended up in that cell. Chained up and trying to think clearly, Seraphina started working through why they were keeping her alive. Torture for intel? Possible. But then she remembered that line, your body is going to be very useful, and concluded, horrified, that she was about to become the barbarian's personal plaything. Her, a noble virgin, a knight. Ending up like this, it was beyond humiliating. On top of that, Seraphina was crushed by the weight of failure. She had let everyone down, and with the food shortages already tearing apart the kingdom of Ildren, she was terrified about what would happen to her people. Then the cell door swung open. A woman walked in and introduced herself as Circe, assistant to the man who had captured Seraphina. Seraphina's eyes went straight to the object hanging at Circe's waist, a pair of nippers, and she immediately concluded that the torture was about to begin. She asked, dead serious, if the goal was to extract information. Circe frowned. She had absolutely no idea what Seraphina was talking about. She said the only orders she'd received were to get Seraphina ready for her master. Circe grabbed the chain keeping Seraphina restrained and left her completely exposed against the wall. Seraphina gritted her teeth and braced for the worst, but what Circe actually did was wash her. Just cleaned the blood and sweat from the battle right off. Simple as that. Seraphina had no clue what was going on. She demanded to know what they were planning. Circe said almost admiringly that she was impressed Seraphina had actually gone up against her master in a duel and survived. She also mentioned that, despite being a warrior, Seraphina had quite a feminine figure. Seraphina turned beet red and shot back that a female warrior doesn't need to have a feminine figure. Circe completely ignored that and said what mattered was that her master had approved. Then Circe reached for the nippers and the knife. Seraphina froze. This was it. The torture was starting. But Circe simply trimmed her nails and then dressed her in a gown. Seraphina just stood there, totally lost. She realized she'd been perfumed with scented oil and genuinely asked herself, completely baffled, whether the barbarians did this with all their prisoners. And then, a roar echoed through the entire place, so loud it sounded like a thunderclap. Circe said, completely unbothered, that it was her master. The man walked in. With that predator-like gaze, he looked Seraphina over from head to toe. Then he introduced himself. Vior, voice of thunder, legitimate son and heir of the great chief Uldane, the one-eyed. Seraphina felt a chill run down her spine. She admitted to herself that, on the battlefield, she hadn't exactly stopped to take a good look. But now, up close, the guy was absolutely massive. And those golden eyes? They didn't even look human. So Seraphina decided to speak up. She said she already knew what Veor's plan was, because when she was a kid, her grandfather used to tell her stories about the insane rituals barbarians performed on virgin women. And she declared, with every last bit of dignity she had left, that she, as a knight and commander of the Eastern Expeditionary Forces, would never surrender or beg for her life. That Veor could cook her or do whatever he wanted. Veor and Circe exchanged a glance. Neither of them understood a single word of that. Veor asked, genuinely confused what she meant by being sacrificed, and then he dropped the bombshell. I brought you here to be my bride. Serafina turned so red you'd think her face was on fire. She just couldn't believe it. She kept insisting it had to be some kind of twisted ritual in disguise. Veor asked, with an annoyingly straightforward kind of logic, that if that were the plan, wouldn't they have already done it? Serafina argued that they were enemies, and enemies don't get married. Veor explained that for generations, his family had a tradition of marrying a knight from her region. Serafina pushed back against that ridiculous idea with everything she had, but then Veor reminded her, with a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, that she herself had just said he could do whatever he wanted with her. Serafina realized she had walked right into that one, but Veor made it clear he hadn't chosen her just because of tradition. He said he chose her because he had crossed blades with her, and seen firsthand how skilled she was. And then, looking her dead in the eyes, he said, "It was love at first sight." Serafina turned red all over again, but this time, with a warmth spreading through her chest. Because no joke, it was the first time in her entire life that anyone had ever said that to her. The very first time. Veor left, leaving Serafina completely flustered, totally unable to process what had just happened. Then the past surfaces. 7 years earlier, a royal decree was issued to launch the 17th Eastern Expedition. Serafina's older brother, Marquis Sidious, announced that she had been appointed commander of the mission. Serafina was thrilled, but before she could leave, Sidious handed her an invitation to a banquet hosted by the Duchess. Serafina knew exactly what that was. A thinly veiled trap dressed up as a party to get her a husband. But since she couldn't say no, she went. When she arrived at the mansion, everyone acted like she didn't exist. She ended up isolated in a corner of the hall. The women whispered among themselves that she looked more like a soldier than a lady. The men, eaten up with jealousy over the fact that she was one of the most powerful people in the kingdom, tried to put her down by saying that being commanded by a woman had to be absolutely humiliating. Fed up with the insults, Serafina stepped outside. 3 of her old friends showed up. They talked for a bit, and all 3 said they were terrified by the news that Serafina would be leading the expedition. They weren't being mean about it. They were just sheltered, raised from birth to be wives, and genuinely scared for her life. They kept warning her that barbarian territory was way too dangerous, that she should let the men handle it, that the battlefield was no place for a woman. They even brought up a certain Lady Wisteresia, the person Serafina admired most in the world, who had vanished in combat. Serafina walked away furious. She thought about how, while those sheltered nobodies stuffed their faces at fancy banquets, her people were going hungry because of the war and the kingdom's failed harvests. Then she heard a scream and went to check it out. She saved a man from 3 attackers and made it clear she'd let them walk if they surrendered. But then she took a closer look. The attackers weren't actual criminals. They were ordinary farmers, desperate, out of options, trying to scrape together enough food for their families. Scared but cornered, they came at her, and Serafina dropped them with ease. Even so, feeling for those men, she handed over her own necklace so they'd have something to sell and survive. The farmers left swearing they'd never do anything like this again, thanking her like she was some kind of guardian angel. The next morning, as Serafina was getting ready to leave, Sidious showed up screaming. He said she had failed to land a husband at the party, and called her selfish, said it was impossible to do politics with a sword in your hand, and just as he was about to go even louder, his face started shifting, slowly morphing, until it became Veor's face. Serafina jolted awake, and there, right beside her, was Veor, sleeping like he didn't have a care in the world. Then, out of nowhere, Veor's sword rose from its scabbard on its own, radiating an overwhelming power that filled the entire room. And Serafina realized with complete and total clarity that she had gotten herself into the biggest mess of her entire life. Serafina stares at Veor's sword and lets out a scream, the kind of scream that could wake the dead, and sure enough, Veor jolts awake from the noise. Half asleep, he asks what on earth she's screaming about. Serafina, completely mortified, demands to know what he's doing there, naked. Veor answers with the most casual energy imaginable. He's sleeping in his own room, obviously. Then Serafina looks around and it hits her. She's not in any cell. She's in Veor's bedroom. And that's when the full panic sets in. Sweating bullets, she swallows hard and asks, voice shaking, if he took advantage of her while she was out. Veor smirks and says that, after everything that went down, things went just fine. Serafina can't remember a single thing. But staring at Veor's sword and realizing where she is, she's fearing the worst. Completely pale, she takes a shaky breath and asks point blank whether he did anything to her against her will. And Veor naturally leans into the joke again, says it's probably better if they just don't talk about it. Serafina's mind goes into overdrive. She thinks, for a noble woman, being captured by barbarians is already an unforgivable humiliation. But if she ends up pregnant by one, she'd literally be increasing the number of enemies her own kingdom has to deal with. There's no coming back from that kind of disgrace. She begs, straight up begs, for Veor to just kill her right then and there. Veor picks up Serafina's sword, gives her a gentle pat on the head, and calmly asks that while he totally gets why she'd want to kill him, why does she want to die so badly herself? Serafina explains that losing in battle is already humiliating enough, and then, In a moment of pure desperation, she tried to attack an unarmed opponent on top of that. As a knight, that goes against everything she stands for, so she begs him to end it before she loses whatever shred of honor she has left as a noble knight. Veor scratches his head and admits this whole thing is way too deep for him, and genuinely questions whether dying over things like pride and reputation is really necessary. Seraphina opens her mouth to launch into a full lecture about nobility and honor, but then Cersei walks in and shuts the whole speech down before it even gets started. And then she drops the bomb with that little smile of hers. "I see you woke up without any complications. Lucky girl." Seraphina short-circuits. She knows exactly what Cersei is implying. And given Veor's sword, the implications are a lot. But Cersei, barely holding back laughter, explains that last night Seraphina was throwing up everything she had, because the sleeping potion used when she was captured was a little stronger than intended. Seraphina turns to Veor and asks, dead serious, whether anything else happened after she passed out. Veor explains he used the standard dosage they typically use among barbarians, a kind of paralytic toxin, and that, as a precaution, he gave some to Seraphina as well. He adds that the potion actually helps with blood clotting since it slows circulation. So, to Seraphina's enormous relief, he confirms he didn't do anything. He just miscalculated the dosage. Then, with the biggest grin on his face, he adds, he would never do anything like that to the woman he just chose as his future wife. Like, imagine if something happened to you, Seraphina. Seraphina freezes, confused, then furious. She demands her sword back so she can slice him up right there. Veor just laughs and says that since she's got so much energy, she's clearly got nothing to worry about. He tells her he made a huge breakfast for the two of them and is absolutely starving. He hasn't eaten anything since he came back from the battlefield. He gets up, tells her he'll be waiting in the common room, says she can come out once she's calmed down, and shuts the door right in her face. Seraphina stands in the middle of the room, completely lost. She sinks to her knees, totally deflated by the reality of being welcomed by the biggest enemies of her kingdom. She thinks of her grandfather, who taught her to wield a sword with skill, but who, even while acknowledging her talent, told her that if she were a man, she could make so much more of that gift, that she should give up on being a knight simply because she was a woman. Her brother felt the same way, but was way more aggressive about it, always giving her grief for turning down marriage proposals and insisting on a knight's life, telling her to just find a decent husband before it was too late. He used to say it's impossible to do politics with a sword, and that's when Seraphina remembers that Veor was the first man who ever genuinely complimented her skill with a blade. No envy, no condescension, just real, honest admiration, and of course topped off with that declaration that he was totally falling for her. Seraphina tries her hardest to deny what she's feeling, but deep down, she knows she's enjoying the attention. She convinces herself that war prisoners are entitled to the bare minimum to survive. After all, the best way to defeat an enemy is through hunger, right? Determined, she tells herself she's a knight who's used to rations and scarcity. Time to show Veor she's a proud knight of the high nobility and commander of the eastern expeditions. When she walks into the common room, she finds a massive, juicy cut of meat roasting over a fire, and she's practically drooling before she even registers it. She can barely remember the last time she had real meat. Her homeland has been dealing with food shortages for years. Then, Veor cuts off a huge piece for her, which shocks her even more. Seraphina can't figure out why they're treating her this well, and she arrives at what she thinks is a brilliant conclusion. They're trying to break her down as a knight by whining and dining her before completely taming her. So she points her finger, firm and resolute, declaring she'd rather starve than accept charity from barbarians. And then, her stomach betrays her completely. It growls, loud, embarrassingly loud. Dying inside, Seraphina asks to be killed again. Veor tells her to cut the drama and says even her own stomach is refusing to go along with this whole death wish, growling like that. He asks if she really wants to keep lying to herself. Then he tells her to eat the meat. Refusing would be disrespecting the life that was taken to provide that food. Taking a life to survive, not for sport, is a valid reason, and with a slight smile, he gently asks her to stop grumbling and eat. Then Cecil leans close to Seraphina's ear and whispers that Veor hunted that animal specifically to welcome her. He went out the night before, after bringing her home, and went hunting alone, because he wanted Seraphina to have a full feast the moment she woke up. Cecil explains that Veor carries serious status, the kind of person that someone like Seraphina would call royalty. Seraphina gets it immediately, something like a prince. And Cecil adds, since Veor holds such a high position and went through all that effort to show hospitality, wouldn't turning it down flat be a massive sign of disrespect, especially for a noblewoman like her? Seraphina sighs, agrees, saying that refusing such a tribute would tarnish her reputation as a knight. So she takes the first bite of meat and nearly loses her mind. The flavor hits so hard it brings tears to her eyes, because it blows way past the rare meats the nobility back home occasionally gets to eat. Cecil can barely hide her smile as Serafina wipes the corner of her mouth. Veyor cracks up at the whole thing. Then Serafina, eyes practically sparkling, asks what animal this came from, because she's already imagining raising the same kind back in her kingdom. Veyor asks if she wants to see it, warning they're butchering it outside. Dying of curiosity, Serafina rushes to the window and nearly passes out when she discovers she's been eating, of all things, dragon meat. She asks, absolutely stunned, if that's really what it is. Veyor confirms it, and Serafina stands there jaw-dropped because she just ate the meat of a legendary creature that most people have never even seen from a distance. But still, she keeps eating, declaring, with complete conviction, that if it's good, it's good. End of story. Veyor loses it laughing. After the meal, he lets her know they're heading out. There's a spot behind the mountain he wants to show her. He mentions there are all kinds of creatures out there. Serafina complains that wandering through unknown lands full of monsters would be completely reckless. Veyor then, with that little smirk of his, asks if she's scared. That hits her ego directly, and Serafina falls for it immediately. She pulls on her boots, grumbling the whole time, while Veyor promises that once she gets to know the area, she's going to love it. When they step outside, Serafina stops. Her jaw drops. Trees as far as the eye can see, and a breathtaking view of the ocean. Veyor asks what she thinks. She admits, with some reluctance, that the place is way more blessed by nature than she ever imagined. Veyor says that unlike the barren battlefield where they met, these lands have a very strong spirit. And he jokes that he hopes Serafina isn't so blown away that she keels over. She tells him to stop messing around. She tells herself these barbarians caught her off guard, but all she needs to do is mentally prepare, and Veyor won't be able to pull that again. They keep walking, and Serafina gets more and more impressed with every step. Rivers, trees, wildlife, birdsong. Nothing like anything she's ever seen in her life. At that moment, a griffin passes directly over their heads. Veyor explains, cool as a cucumber, that dragons are just one of the common creatures around here, that they're incredibly hard to take down, but as long as you stay away from nests with hatchlings, they leave you alone. Serafina asks, voice cracking, how on earth he expects her to ever get used to this. Veyor says she'll adjust eventually. After all, just a few minutes ago she was going to town on dragon meat. Serafina wants the ground to swallow her whole. Then she hears a sound she's never heard before. And just ahead, she comes face to face with a stunning waterfall. Veyor asks if she's never seen one before. She tries to deny it, but remembers that what passes for one back home doesn't come close to this. Veyor notices the sadness in her expression and says he didn't bring her here to show off, that he genuinely just wanted to share this view with her, but he admits there's another reason they're here. Serafina asks what, and Veyor tells her to take her clothes off. Serafina dies of embarrassment and demands to know why they do that. Veyor, with a completely straight face, asks, well, what would a man and a woman do together? Undressed? In the water? Serafina's mind goes straight to the worst case scenario, and Veyor just shouts, we're taking a bath, genius! She tries to play it cool, saying that's exactly what she was thinking, then asks how they're supposed to bathe in the same spot. It's completely inappropriate, but Veyor explains it's a barbarian custom to bathe together. Serafina shouts that she will never follow that barbarian custom, not in a million years. Cersei then points out that since there are no bath salts, noble customs have their limits, and the oil applied to Serafina the day before is well past its expiration date. She's starting to smell. With no real choice, Serafina goes to bathe, accompanied by Cersei, and somehow she manages to force Veyor to go to the other side of the river. Serafina says Cersei is only there to make sure she doesn't run. Cersei says she's actually there to keep her safe. Serafina doesn't buy it. Then a giant lizard appears out of nowhere and nearly gives her a heart attack, proving Cersei right. Serafina looks around and realizes they're completely surrounded by monsters of every shape and size. She takes off running. She stops behind a rock, out of breath, and hears a man's voice. Her heart sinks. She bolted without thinking, and now some other barbarian might grab her. The man approaches and asks what she's doing out here. Serafina looks at him and freezes, face completely flushed. She thinks, no way. That young barbarian is insanely good looking. Not even back west do guys come like that. The young man figures she ran from the monsters while bathing and mentions he's the son of a woman from the west, that when he was younger, his mother used to tell him how blown away she was when she first arrived in these lands and saw all the rich nature and the creatures. Serafina, analyzing how young he looks, concludes the mother must have arrived with the 16th expedition, probably a knight in her early 20s about 20 years ago. Then she sneezes. The cold got to her. And the young man, without a second thought, pulls off his own shirt and wraps it around Serafina, saying a woman shouldn't be catching a chill like that and that they should head back to where her clothes are. Serafina nearly combusts on the spot. Because on top of being gorgeous, the guy is a total gentleman, completely different from how Vior usually acts, which bumps her mood down a little. Then the young man presses his hand to her forehead to check for a fever. Serafina completely locks up. He's way too close, and she has zero experience with guys. And then he scoops her up into his arms to carry her back safely. Serafina can barely form a coherent thought. For a woman who's never been treated like this, it feels like something straight out of a fairy tale. Cersei finally catches up and asks how on earth things got to this point. And then she calls the young man by name, Veor. Serafina completely short-circuits. The dream guy is Veor. Veor jokes that being forgotten by his own fiancée is a little rough, but says the fact that he shaved and got to watch Serafina blush like a schoolgirl makes him very happy. Then adds with the biggest smile, "She's so pure!" Serafina, furious and with her face on fire, plants her hand right across his face. Veor, absolutely delighted, says that a flustered reaction followed by a slap is exactly what he'd expect from the woman he chose. Serafina pretends she didn't enjoy any of it and blames everything on the monsters that chased her there. Cersei mentions that, as for the monsters, there's nothing to worry about. Master Veor made sure to patrol the surrounding areas beforehand. Veor admits that since Serafina absolutely did not want to be seen, he went and cleared the area himself, but that he would have loved to do it by her side. Cersei adds that compared to the dragon they ate, the creatures by the lake are basically harmless. Then Veor turns to Serafina and says that today he got to see every possible expression on the face of the woman he fell for, and that hunting a dragon for it was nothing. Serafina goes pink, turns her face away, and grudgingly admits she'll make an exception and forgive him this time, and that the scenery wasn't bad at all. Veor lights up and says that once they get home, he'll finally get to find out what his fiancée is truly capable of. Serafina says she hasn't decided anything about this whole engagement thing. Cersei gives her a sympathetic look, which only irritates her more. As Serafina walks ahead of them, Cersei and Veor exchange a glance and land on the same conclusion. Total tsundere. Serafina, meanwhile, no matter how hard she tries to seem annoyed, knows deep down she completely fell for clean-shaven Veor. But a few days later, to Serafina's absolute disappointment, Veor's beard had already grown right back.